So if we go back, we need to start to bring these training zones into an energy system, because that is exactly what training is trying to do. Training is trying to stress an energy system so that way we can break it down and start to rebuild it as we go.
That's right. And with the stimulus, there is a response and an adaptation, and also rest
Right.
is required for this, which we all suck at as type A endurance athletes. But with these specific zones, we can then again look at those underlying energy systems and start to target them. And something like this image really helps convey what each zone is trying to do, because you can, your coach can tell you, or you can set them in training peaks, but you may forget, like, why am I making this athlete train so slow all the time? Why are they're complaining a lot? But it's a great way to sort of represent what you're actually trying to achieve and what happens in an Ironman, a marathon, like an endurance multi-stage mountain bike race, because we need to be effective and we need to be representative of the demands that we're going to undertake.
Exactly. And then you need to also, if you look at it that way, you also need to look at the flip side and say, okay, we're spending a lot of time in zone 5 training. Why are we doing that? Does that actually have anything to do with our event? So as Will talked about in the last module, aerobic fitness is number 1 pretty much all the time, unless you're Usain Bolt trying to sprint, right?
Yeah. He doesn't need to recover. He doesn't need to do intermittent sprints. It's just one effort every 4 years.
Yeah, I think he does a few more scattered throughout there.
I guess he's got to qualify.
Yeah, so if we're an endurance athlete, say we're doing like an Ironman, why are we spending so much time in zone 5 stressing the ATP PCR system, right?
Right, and we can tell when an athlete has been doing this training, I don't want to necessarily say improperly, but not as prescribed, by analyzing the training with zones post-event, like post-race, post-training. So if we bring up a file, we can see there's going to be a huge array of different efforts and intensities inlaid with one single effort. This is is this your race, Matt?
No, this is one of the athletes that I work with from a local championship race. And what I did is I overlaid their functional threshold power there, just to kind of give an idea of how the power output related to that functional threshold power.
Yeah, and because if we were looking predominantly, just at heart rate pretty much sits just high the whole entire time. You'd think, this effort through heart rate was probably zone 4 to 5, which is understandable. But then if we want to look a bit deeper, and we'll get into this more in further modules, but just in terms of referencing with zones, we can have a look at the power, and it's just a mess. It's a dog's breakfast. But then if we are able to, you can see there's an FTP there, and if we looked at average power or something like that, it's not really going to give us as much information as something like zones. So if we overlay zones and power distributions, we can start to see where this effort starts to look. So if you have, again, bike racing, it's just a mess. It's not a steady state. It's not an Ironman. It's not a half Ironman. It's not a time trial. There's surging, there's taking turns. And then we can see even it gives a good indication of pacing, because just eyeballing a 5-hour race on Training Peaks, especially if you're trying to do it on your phone, it's hard to pull out something. But you can see here, if you're looking at sort of the first quarter of the graph on the left, you can see it's dark purple. Okay, you don't even really need to know what the zones are. You just know that they get harder as it goes up. And then over to the last quarter of the graph on the right-hand side, it's a lot more light purple, Matt.
Yeah. So I mean, it looks like someone blew up here. Is this yours, Will?
It's my Zwift race.
What happened in the middle, actually? Were you I think I'm gonna blow up, and then you started coasting?
It was a descent. Yeah, and
oh, that came at a good time. I went way too hard.
Yeah, well, I still blew pretty hard. But you can see here, it's zones has been able to show us what kind of intensity I was riding at different points within the race. And then we can have a look time in zones, and we can also have a look at some of the distribution curve. So that's where zones are really valuable after the fact. And we can then go, okay, if this is what a race looks like, this is what your standard race, although probably, an improperly paced race looks like, we can start to try and incorporate that in towards our training. Like if we are spending time in zone 5 or 6 within our race, we should probably touch on that within training. And we can do that just by like a simple analysis to have a look. If we're doing an Ironman and there is like 0 time in zone 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it doesn't really matter that we aren't training in there. We can show an athlete that they need to, focus on what the bread and butter is, what the most important part is.
I would say, actually, if you're doing an Ironman and there is any time in zone 4, 5, 6, that maybe you're not doing it right.
Right? It should be an alert or something.
Yeah. Warning. You still have to run a marathon.
Yeah.
So what do you take? What do you take from your file here? Right? Do you have any takeaways?
Yeah. Like I actually didn't realize the amount of time I spent in zone 6 and 7. Like it really feels like for a majority of the race, I was kind of like just above threshold, right? So like I was trying obviously in the start, the first kind of 40 minutes of the race, which the big climb was, I was like at and here's probably my threshold's 320 and I was riding at 370. So threshold being 60 minute, and I thought I could hold 370, 380 with surges for about 20 to 30 minutes, which is kind of possible. But the amount of surges within that, so it's not just that, like, I thought I was riding 360, 370, 380, somewhere in that range that I knew I could sustain for approximately 30 minutes. But then there was like the time in zone like 7 where you'd stretch to get back on the bunch, which is really, really hurting me. And just like clearly I blew up.
Yeah. I would say actually this is about as steady state as it gets.
Dr. Matt and I started the Performance Advantage podcast to help runners, riders, and outdoor competitors integrate sports science more effectively into their training and racing.
So over the last few years, Dr. Will and I have covered topics like the lactate threshold, training zones, power meters, and fatigue. Now we're condensing these popular and misunderstood topics into practical courses.
Our courses take our same podcasting style approach to learning and education, and we break it down into bite-sized chunks that you can digest either all at once or as practical little resources to use as and when you need them.
So the biggest difference between our course and any other course you might have taken is that we don't lecture you. It's a conversation between Will and I, and we're explaining complex sports science principles in an easy to understand manner.
Yeah, we also integrate like how we use them on the regular. Our courses come with a certificate of completion, as well as a lot of takeaway resources such as training plans, scientific articles, and quizzes that you can do to check your progress along the way.
Our sports science courses are available now. Register on performanceadvantagepodcast.com for immediate access.